category is What the Trans, Darlings?
Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of What the Trans!
Oh, what the trans!
Yes, what the trans. If people are so determined to use trans as a dirty word, we will use it as an exclamation of surprise or alarm, I guess. I don't know, whatever we were suggesting when we called the podcast that. How are you?
Surprise? I'm quite good, yeah. It's lovely Wednesday afternoon. Oh gosh, it's been a long day at work if I can't remember what day of the week it is.
Indeed. It's more of a Wednesday evening, if we're honest, but... Yeah.
Oh, that is too true. I'm doing alright aside from that. I booked a nice laser hair removal thing for my face recently.
Yes, make your face nice and crispy.
Oh, crispy. That's a way to put it, isn't it? It's,
Yes, yeah, that kind of faint smell of burning and stinging. I remember it well.
See how that's a thing that'll be in my not so distant future.
Indeed. Yeah, well, obviously, let me know how you get on.
Exactly, but yeah, how are you?
I'm all right, yes. Muddling through, as ever. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of stuff to talk about, and it's kind of been an all go on the podcast the last couple of weeks, hasn't it?
Oh, indeed.
So in terms of the stuff that I've been doing, I've mostly been dealing with that. So, dear listener, as you almost are certainly aware by now, our co-founder Michelle has chosen to depart. She won't be involved with the podcast anymore, and obviously we wish her absolutely the best for whatever she chooses to do next. She's still my friend, obviously. We still talk. We were chatting a couple of minutes right before I started recording. But it was all too much in terms of covering what we have to cover and kind of, we're staring into the abyss and trying to joke about it, and the abyss is also staring into us. And that takes a toll, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I know perfectly well it does.
But yeah, I can definitely see what you mean from just glancing from the side.
Quite. And you're involved in all of the discussions that we would be having about, here's something that's been going on and here's something else that's been going on. And we're trying to think about this stuff, quote unquote, fairly neutrally, because we are trying to be honest and accurate in what we talk about on the podcast, but at the same time, it is about us. It's about the people who we are the people that the Tories and, anti-trans activists are railing against us every moment they're awake. And it's too much.
Exactly, the fate of our own fate in the hands of others who care very little, and we are left spiralling, not knowing our own fate, whilst in a state of utter fear and panic. In trying to deliver that kind of news.
Yeah.
It's definitely, you can definitely see the toll that can take.
Yeah, and it's 5 years of it, So, honestly, I'm surprised we've made it this far. So, Michelle, darling, we love you and absolutely understand the decision that you've made. So, going forward, it's going to be me and Alyx for a little while. We're probably going to be getting some sexy new podcast talent, but more on that as soon as we worked out who and what that is.
Indeed.
But there was something else this week. Well, last week, I suppose, but something else that we did that took up quite a bit of time, wasn't there?
Oh, yes, something very big, pink, and also green as well, simultaneously.
Because we were nominated for an award at the Pink News Awards, but we elected to pull out of that. Last week, difficult decision again, but we put together a statement, which one of the other members of the team put in so much work to do and a lot of research. So if you're interested, the statement that we've put online as to why we chose to drop out of those awards, and it's to do with, we kind of think it's pinkwashing because some of the sponsors of the Pink News Awards are also putting quite a lot of money into fossil fuels, we don't think that's appropriate, and we didn't want to be complicit in it. So if you're interested, please do read the statement that's on our website, but it talks about, goes into some detail and provides some links that you might want to have a look at if you're concerned about the climate crisis, and you should be. There's some very interesting stuff there. And so that's why we chose to drop out. And I lost no sleep over it, honestly.
Same. I think Shroomy definitely did an amazing job of that statement, and I don't think I could have said it better myself. And yeah, check it out, everyone. It's pretty good. We'll put it in the... it's on the website as well, so check it out on there.
Yeah, absolutely. However, much as we'd like to sit here and blow our own trumpet for a little longer, we should probably crack on. So, there's no easy way to say this. We're going to talk about Alice Litman. We start this episode, as we do with so many others, with something depressing. And I'm going to have to put a content warning right here because we are going to talk about someone committing suicide. Now, Alice Litman was a 20-year-old trans woman who died last year in 2022. In a recent ruling on the 13th of October, it said that the long over 1,000-day wait for access to a gender identity clinic had played a role in her decision to take her own life. In 2019, Alice was referred over to GIDS, the Gender Identity Service, and put on the waiting list for a first appointment, and following an additional suicide attempt at that time, or around that time, she was referred to the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, or CAMS. But despite another attempt later on that year, Alice was completely discharged from CAMS. So it kind of seemed like they looked away from the problem there. So all of this is happening while she was waiting to be seen by the GIC, a wait that she herself described as unbearable. And meanwhile, Tavistock and Alice's GP said there wasn't a denial of life-saving emergency care, but there was a delay. And so the coroner, in their report that was issued on the 13th, said, "It seems to me that all of these services are underfunded and insufficiently resourced for the level of need that the society we now live in presents. And given the ridiculously extensive waiting lists in some cases, that's not a problem that's going to go away." So I guess obviously you were in the discussions on this. What did you think of this case?
When it comes to this case, it's utterly horrifying. I mean, she's only like 2 years younger than I am, and I can barely comprehend. Yeah, it's absolutely horrific to see the case and what happened. It's the solution to the situation is so plainly out there, yet it's just completely ignored. It's like, we know what the problem is, we know the solution, but it's not happening.
Yeah, they're not going to move on the solution because they would prefer that trans people didn't exist, basically.
And now she's dead.
Yeah. As a result of that underfunding, of that policy of cruelty towards trans people, that I feel is deliberate, because as you say, there's a couple of really easy wins that they could get by making a few adjustments here and there to the gender service, but it's underfunded, and obviously it's underfunded quite deliberately, and it just makes you sick, honestly. I was worried that I would get a bit upset while reading that bit out, to be perfectly honest. That's a hell of a place to start the episode, isn't it?
Not the best place to start, and it seems to only get worse.
What makes me really angry about it is that that support is being so deliberately withheld while people are demonstrably suffering. And while this is having such an impact on so many people, with years and years long waiting lists. We've also spoken to Jocelyn over at the Good Law Project, who, the GLP have been dealing with this case, and here's what she had to say about the coroner's ruling.
So we reached out to Kate Litman in mid-2022, essentially just to offer our support with the case. So we helped put her in contact with legal representation, the family, so that Alice's story was properly told at the inquest. It's essentially sort of the primary way. And so we engaged them with a highly skilled legal team over at Bindmans. We funded sort of the actual costs of the legal representation as well. We did a lot of work sort of liaising and supporting with comms. We put out a video, I think that was early this year or late last year, interview with the family, just talking about their experiences and specifically around her transition, and obviously
So quite a lot of stuff in the background in terms of supporting the family and letting them know, oh, well, here's where to go to receive that kind of help and assistance. That's good.
It's really important for us that essentially the way it went down and the whole sort of enabled by them. Obviously, they had the actually something like this. It's really sensitive, so it was very important that it was guided by their wishes and communicate.
Absolutely, because you don't want to try and railroad them or step on toes or anything. You just kind of want to offer assistance, don't you? I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to the verdict then a little bit. What would you have expected from the coroner's verdict?
Bit of a tricky one. We, specifically a Good Law Project, and I think the hope was essentially some form of acknowledgement, standing by the coroner of the ways in which the problems and failings within trans and mental health care support systems have that impact on her life and towards her death. I think what we were hoping for and what the coroner did in the end is essentially do a report to prevent future death. So basically that's where a coroner perceives that there are attributes of a case, whether or not they were causative towards a person, that create a risk that future people could die in similar circumstances. So she's chosen essentially to issue such a report, like to the bodies that were responsible for her care. So in this being sent towards both the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic and Surrey and Borders Foundation Trust, who were providing healthcare previously towards her, although they essentially her healthcare under CAM services, child and adolescent mental health services, during the transfer to adult care, or what moved to adult care after she turned 18. They essentially offered her some form of support, but largely ended up essentially from mental health care. So the report will be going to those bodies, into the Royal College of General Practitioners, just coroner's understanding of the factors essentially that could potentially lead to life, asking these bodies to respond 6 days to come back with essentially, you've raised these issues with us and the due to address them.
So in a sense we should hear those responses quite soon then.
It should be coming out again within 56 days of the ruling.
So that's still a good couple of months, isn't it? But in a sense, that's quicker than I expected.
Yeah, sometimes these processes, like the specific timescales, anything in the legal sort of sphere, can get very a little bit unpredictable, and a little as a specifically statutory requirement, as I understand it, to respond 6 days to those reports. The chief coroner wants the report and can choose to publish the report to prevent future deaths on their website, essentially, because that can also sort of be useful learning the public bodies that might be facing similar issues and wanting to adjust and adapt their process.
You kind of hope that attention will be paid there, but the cynic in me is not very hopeful, I guess, at the moment. But when I read the judgment itself, or rather the reports around it, I was surprised by how forthright it was, to be honest. Has there been anything surprising for you about the verdict?
I think I was concerned going into it, and I think this was said by the family, that essentially the issues wouldn't get ventilated or as they did, that it might be a relatively short process, that it wouldn't dig into sort of these wider issues specifically around weight, a big concern, that it wouldn't touch on that, when obviously that was such a sort of core component. This was part of the coroner's findings in the deterioration of.
Yeah, that did take me a little bit by surprise. I guess I wasn't expecting. I guess the cynic in me once again was driving, and I wasn't expecting them to have paid any attention to it. They just skip over that and just issue a boilerplate verdict was my expectation. So I think, yeah, you kind of wish something like this could have come about in less tragic circumstances. But final question, what are your thoughts and hopes on this ruling possibly having a repercussion on trans healthcare?
Yeah, I hope that essentially will be a sign for the bodies that are being addressed by these reports to take really serious action, that this is something that they can at least take measures and take steps to prevent. I think one of the big things that's sort of and is a big thrust of what the family sort of, I think, will be going on to camp is healthcare within a primary care setting. So at the GP level is a remit for GPs to prescribe bridging prescriptions, obviously, in the sense of prescribing hormone treatment to people who are on the waiting list to be seen by a gender. But it seems like the vast, or at least a large swath of GPs simply do not do this. There's a range of routes can be for. A lot of them, we get the sense, do not feel like they're either by sort of the wider organizations they're working within, the existence of like proper guidance and training to be able to provide those forms. And that's partly, I think, why it's that the Royal College of GPs specifically is being brought in and being addressed reports. My personal hope is that they're able to produce some kind of clear guide, how, firstly, the actual nuts and bolts, how to provide gender affirming bridging prescriptions a setting, but secondly, like the wider context of why it's such a cool thing, especially with the system in such a state at gender clinics, with these waiting lists, with, as the coroner acknowledged, these really problems of under resourcing and underfunding, which of course persist throughout all parts of the NHS.
Yeah.
But in my view, I think, as I understand it, a lot of what I have studied seems to be indicating it demands resources, put barriers in the way of people accessing this healthcare. That the gatekeeping at gender identity clinics is, to a certain extent, to those waiting lists, right? And I think go some way towards, having an understanding at the primary care level of what they can do and how they can actually help people who are having these problems. Is important. The most of the thrust of sort of these reports, what's going to be coming out. Obviously, I haven't read the report myself. It's not been released yet. But is also going to be around ensuring there's proper like knowledge and training for the mental health needs of people who are on these waiting lists, who are waiting to access care. Because at the current system, it's essentially
you're on your own.
To want to have it as their responsibility in the way these systems are set up. The gender clinic will say that's something for mental health care within primary care settings, because we're already under-resourced as it is. It was a point that got made that you simply can't do that within the GIC setting without taking from actually providing the gender-affirming care and making those waiting lists even longer. There's also specifically one of the issues that that's going to touch on, the fact of these delays in accessing gender-affirming care. My personal view is that a pricing can go a long way towards reducing the level of demand faced by the gender identity clinics, so they're able to get those down. I'm not sure what other way there is to get those, to be quite frank, with the resources that they're equipped with, outside of a massive investment, both those clinics and indeed in all parts of the NHS. But I think the direction of travel with this government, that doesn't seem like a particularly likely thing that we can hope for.
It's unfortunately not, yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for having us. You can follow us on our social media, as well as specifically following the campaign for Alice on Twitter.
Great, thank you.
That was a good interview from Jocelyn there.
Yeah, it's nice to get that insight, isn't it?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, there's only so much you can say about this whole case. It's horrendous, isn't it? The waiting list has gotten to such extreme, ridiculous, Kafka-esque lengths. We can't even get healthcare.
We know what the solution is. And it could save the NHS so much money. It seems like a net positive on every front. It's probably been said thousands of times from us over the 5 years we've been doing it.
Well, and as I've said, and probably an equal number of times, the cruelty's the point, though. I think there's official neglect that comes from neglect, and then there's the neglect that stems from deliberate policy decisions, and it's very difficult to look on this. Oh, it's a mistake, and we can fix it, and we will do it. Just bear with us. We're sorting it out. As a whole, the NHS is underfunded, and this, I think, is incredibly underfunded, and that's been the case for many, many years. Even before and at the very start of this austerity thing that's brought us to this sorry pass. Honestly, not quite sure what to say about it. This young woman has died, and she's probably not the only one that it's had that impact on. That the mental health aspect is significant. I think.
Exactly, even as she said, it was unbearable in her own words.
Yeah, I mean, it must be. You know, obviously I've got my own health challenges unrelated to trans healthcare, but it took me long enough to go through the system several years ago now, and it's only gotten worse. And no one's doing anything to fix it. The will and the money is not there.
That's all we can say, really, isn't it?
It is, but I think all is not lost. I think there is still a certain amount of political pressure that we can try and exert. We can talk to our MPs, we can,
exactly.
Try and raise a stink about it, because this is something now that, and it has been for a long time, but it's not good enough, and it's costing lives, and it's costing people so much time. Getting through the gender system is like having a second full-time job, because you've got to follow up, and you've got to chase them, and you've got to phone through, and you've got to try and make sure you're still in the system and you haven't been forgotten about. And that in itself is just extremely difficult to go through, even if everything is going well,
Yeah, and that's even when you're on the system as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. This is very difficult, and I'm sure this has been a difficult segment for a lot of our audience to listen to, but all is not lost. There is still time for a revolution.
Indeed. Indeed, it's another saga of cruel moves by such a government, and there's more cruelty they're even thinking up right now.
Yeah, well, and on that very subject, let's move on to our next story, shall we?
So, in a speech in New York to a right-wing think tank, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman was quoted to say that if you are simply being gay or a woman and fearful of discrimination in your country of origin, that they should not be granted asylum. Given the nature of such a comment, London Pride then announced it would be organising a protest outside of Parliament Square, a protest I went to and spoke to the cool people at the African Rainbow Family, and this is what they had to say about Suella Braverman's comments. Alright, so I'm with Addy from the African Rainbow Family. So, given the name of this protest is Stand Against Suella, what are we standing against Suella about?
We're standing against Suella's position on LGBTIQ rights to seek asylum in the United Kingdom, and a comment in the United States about simply being gay does not qualify you to be to seek protection wherever you can find it is inhumane and it is inconsiderate. So we are here today to speak against it, to say that it is wrong. It is wrong in all shapes and forms, and then she should retract the statement.
Of course, we're talking about UK policy as well. So what are your concerns with UK policy at the moment?
The policy is quite, it is broken. The policy generally is broken. Asylum seekers would have to wait too long to get their claims heard. And then they are put in very inhumane and very, very, very poor conditions. Their living condition is quite, it's a shame, really.
Absolutely inhumane.
It's absolutely inhumane. And then it doesn't linger for very long, because at the end of the day, they still don't get their claims to be heard quite early enough. And that puts their mental health in a very bad state or bad shape.
Oh, exactly. So for those who aren't familiar with the African Rainbow Family, able to explain what the African Rainbow Family does?
Yes, the African Rainbow Family is a support organization. We are a registered charity, and we support persons seeking asylum of LGBTIQ claims. If you are lesbian, gay, or from the LGBTIQ extraction, we support you and we give you all the necessary facility to, meet other people. We also help with their mental health by referring them to support facilities. We signpost them to different organizations as well.
Also, as well, with the UK government, they're eyeing up leaving the Equality and Human Rights Commissions. What's your thoughts on that at the moment?
Then that puts the United Kingdom in the same pedestal as Russia and China, and then that makes United Nations very unfriendly.
Oh, exactly, yeah. So, given the looming election with the Tory government, What are your thoughts on Labour's policies themselves, given that they're trying to line themselves up as successors?
I believe both parties, both governments are just playing politics with human lives, with human rights, and unfortunately, we are, in between a rock and a hard place, and we just have to choose one of them. But then, if you look at it, Labour has more plans than
Liberal,
especially for people who we support, immigrants. And if Labour promises that they will be more friendly to immigrants, then we should also expect that we get better dealings. But then we don't play politics. We are not politicians ourselves. We just want a better life, and we just want good life for those that we support, who are the refugees, who are the lesbians, who are those who seek asylum because of their sexual orientation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for
your
chat there.
So, I don't think they were mincing their words.
So they didn't mince their words, and even with all the stuff about Labour and their lack of
A spine?
a spine, exactly, and being as bad or worse than the Tory government, saying they'll be more thorough than the Tories, they still gave a element of hope to it. They said, we just need to still keep communicating and try and make sure that our voices are heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be dipping into the various conferences a little bit later on in the episode, but as Suella was giving her speech at the Tory party conference, there was a protest there, wasn't there?
Oh gosh, yeah, because there was this whole thing from Suella Braverman at the conference saying that there's a hurricane coming for the UK of migrants in the UK. And what are your thoughts on that one?
I think she might be overstating it, maybe a little bit. I think this constant refrain of, shooting at boats and trying to sink dinghies from people fleeing a war-torn country for a better life, trying to get to the UK, none of whom are actually arriving on small boats. That's not really a thing that's happening, and they're drumming up this hatred towards this non-existent problem, which is actually pretty similar to something that they're doing about trans people as well. Just, might consider that the same playbook.
The whole dramatised thing about dinghies on the channel just brings that kind of thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So she's absolutely overstating it by saying there's a hurricane. But even just during her speech at the conference, there was an attendee of the conference, a Tory party member, who protested what she was saying and was kicked out.
Talk about the party of free speech, am I right?
Yeah, quite. So speech is so free that we'll actually kick out a fairly prominent Tory guy, Andrew Boff his name was, for saying things that we don't like. Free speech, everybody, but only if it's our speech. Only if it's against immigrants and hating trans people. That's the free speech they want to preserve.
Oh, indeed. I actually saw the footage on the internets as well, and it wasn't even that
the
much.
Electrical interweb.
Oh, the online cloud interfaces. Had to sound more like a boomer, am I right?
Well, I've heard some people call it the tubes.
The tubes.
Yes.
But anyway, yes.
Slightly off topic.
Off topic on the boomer side. But yeah, as I was saying...
you saw the footage.
Yeah, I saw the footage, and he didn't even shout it. It was like a bit more of sort of volume. I'm sort of saying, it's like, what a load of rubbish. That sort of tone of voice.
He wasn't standing and screaming at her and jumping up and down.
Exactly. I think if he knew, he would have probably done that, because he sort of go, if I'm going to be arrested, I might as well make a bit. I might as well just
go down swinging.
Do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as I say, we'll be diving into both major party conferences a little bit later on in the episode. It just Suella Braverman overstating everything, I think, and she was the one who made the rubbish joke about how Keir Starmer can't tell the difference between men and women, so he'll be the first female leader of the Labour Party. Yeah, so she made a rubbish joke in the Commons about that, and it was literally like tumbleweed. Nobody so much as tittered.
No, it's more like it just makes my face scream, because I'm just feeling so sick at how evil the depth she's willing to get into. But I'm like, what do I say? I'm just no words about it.
Your words can't be harsh enough.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's enough whinging about Suella Braverman, and thank you, listener, for sticking with us. Just quickly, to finish up the news, we do have something a little lighter, although, of course, it's not from the UK. So there's quite a lot of countries in the world, you might have heard. Many of them have different ways of recognising a person's transition, and in an alarmingly large number, you have to have had some level of surgical intervention, usually involving sterilisation, in order to do so. But this week, that list of countries became a little bit shorter, because Japan has ruled that requiring such surgery as part of a change of legal gender is unconstitutional. The Shizuoka Family Court heard a case brought by trans man Gen Suzuki, who submitted a request to change his gender to male on official documents back in 2021. Japan's current law does require some kind of genital surgery before permitting any kind of gender change, but with Suzuki's court victory, this is now likely to change itself. The 2003 law in question requires a diagnosis of gender dysphoria by at least 2 doctors for the individual to be aged 18 or older, and that all sounds rather familiar, but also for the person to be unmarried and with no underage children, which thankfully doesn't. On October 12th, Suzuki's case was upheld, with the Shizuoka Family Court agreed that the requirements to undergo the surgery to update a gender marker raised a question of necessity and rationality. There's a similar case coming up in Japan's Supreme Court as well, brought by a trans woman this time, so this ruling has come at a good time and will hopefully have an impact on that Supreme Court case so that the law will be changed for good. So, yeah, I thought that was quite good news.
Oh, exactly, some progress. And I think from what I've recalled, Japan is usually one hell of a conservative country a lot of the time. I think they still haven't legalised gay marriage yet or anything yet. But it's, it's a step forward, which there's not many steps forwards much else at the moment. So just having that is something, isn't it?
And it's, to our Japanese trans siblings, solidarity, and we hope you win the fight, basically. And it's a shame that other island nations with conservative leaders can't also do something like this. Just a thought. I mean, we do have gender recognition, it's just a ridiculous process, isn't it? But anyway, it's great news, and you notice how I've had to go more or less to the other side of the world to find some good news.
It's a step forward, and I'm really loving it.
Yeah.
I just hope we see more of this in the future.
Yeah, from lots of different countries, basically. I want that progress to be happening all over the world. It's a shame that at the moment that progress has been halted and may indeed be going backwards, but that's not the case everywhere else. People in other countries, perhaps, or fingers crossed, are on the right side of history. And at the moment, the UK is not.
Oh, indeed. There's still time for the worldwide transgender revolution, I suppose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Gotta hope for it. I've advocated for that enough on this show. I usually say I have a solution to this problem, and it starts with A and ends with insurrection.
Well, I suppose if it starts in Japan, you've got those Gundam robots to help us along, right?
Imagine that. A Gundam robot in trans colours, which I'm pretty sure I've seen on my girlfriend playing Armored Core 6.
Oh, we need more pictures of that. I'd put that straight on the Instagram.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure we can manage that. So if you've got a fancy Gundam game where you've got a huge fighting robot in the trans colours, let us know at What the Trans.
And we'll look forward to seeing it.
I think that's enough of the news, though.
Ends it off on a good note. That's the main bit, isn't it?
Yes, with where we just immediately equated the entire nation of Japan with giant fighting robots.
Just the way we do it.
Yeah, that's how we roll. But yes, let's leave the news there. I really do wish we had something more positive to report on. But that's kind of not really our brand at the moment. But let's get on to the meat. With apologies to any vegetarians or vegans listening, we generally mean the main course, I suppose. So it is party conference season. Have you noticed?
What? Oh my god, I must have missed it.
Yeah, there was nothing in the news about it, was there?
Not at all.
So, yes, party conference season, fun times. So both of the UK's main parties held their conferences in cities up here in North. Labour went for Liverpool and the Tories were here in Manchester, sadly just out of range of my trebuchet. You've probably seen and heard some stuff about what they've done and said, but first I'll give you a few notes about what the city was like while they were here. So, a partner of mine has already described it as being like there was an occupying army. These huge, heavy concrete and metal fencing was set up around where the conference was taking place, yeah. So partly along Peter Street and with an entrance on St. Peter's Square, if you know Manchester. And every year it seems like the area that they section off for the conference gets a little bit bigger. The conference was happening in the Manchester Convention Centre, which in my head is still the GMEX, which shows you how old I am. And that's right next to the Midland Hotel, which is where the majority of the Tories were actually stayed while they were here, since it's inside their little exclusion zone. We had police gunmen deployed up high, both inside and outside the fenced-off area. Black-clad figures on the rooftops with rifles made a lot of people justifiably nervous.
Bit overkill.
Out front near the St. Peter's Square entrance was an area on the square where a lot of protests were taking place during the conference, including one by Manchester Disabled People Against the Cuts, or DPAC. I was supposed to be going to that, but Comrade Girlfriend had COVID, so I didn't want to go out while being potentially infectious. But obviously the big news from the conference happens inside it. And it leaned so hard into the culture war agenda, I'm amazed they didn't end up with red baseball caps saying "Make the Poor Afraid Again" written on them. It started as you'd expect, with several Tories, including former Prime Minister Liz Truss and former human Priti Patel, expressing gratitude and even support towards GB News, even as Ofcom investigates them as a result of more than 7,000 complaints about a broadcast of theirs at the end of September. Weird flex, Liz and Priti, but okay, Tory's gonna Tory. So, the main story from the conference for our purposes, however, happened on October the 4th, when current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak taking to the stage to deliver a speech in which he said that Brits are being bullied into thinking that people can be any sex they want to be, and went on to say, "A man is a man, a woman is a woman, and that's just common sense," which was greeted with thunderous applause from the audience of Tory MPs, party members, and other Tory activists and donors in the audience. But then, less than a minute after that, he also claimed that the Conservative Party had allowed love to cascade down the generations. Literally, he said something hateful about trans people, and then without even taking a breath, he claimed that the Tories are all about love. It's fucking unreal! And it's not even the first time that Sunak has made transphobic comments. Back in June, Pink News reported on an exclusive that showed a clip of him joking about women having penises and mocking Lib Dem leader Ed Davey for being a supporter of trans rights. Obviously, those comments were widely condemned because they're fucking gross, and it does seem that Sunak's popularity has managed to dip even further after he made the speech, which is kind of impressive in itself, given the impressive lack of popularity that he had already, but according to a YouGov poll, his popularity went down by 5 points in 1 week following his appearance at the conference. So, yeah, fucking Tories, right near where I live. Ew.
And then spewing that crap.
Yeah.
And speaking of crap, a bunch of our audience, I asked the audience what they thought about the Tory conference, and...
Yes, there were a lot of very colourful visual images, weren't
Oh,
there?
indeed, and speaking on a topic of crap, one even said, "I was very disappointed that it didn't suffer a catastrophic sewage plumbing failure and fill floor to ceiling with liquid shit." As you can see, they're massive fans of the Tory government.
Yeah, very good.
Loving of them. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom saying, "A man is a man and a woman is a woman." That's just that in itself.
It's such a dog whistle, isn't it? But because the transphobes and, organised anti-trans activists in the audience know exactly what that means. And the whole, people are being bullied into thinking people can change sex. It's like, well, shut the fuck up, you're the bullies, for Christ's sake. So what else did we have from the audience? What, to give us some levity in this dark time.
Well, I think the rest of them were really saying, I can't put it into words because a thread filled with repeated swear words and curses of boils and weeping sores upon the PM, assaulted cabinet ministers and their families until this third generation would not make for pleasant reading. I think we can share a lot of the same sentiments on that one. Of how for the witches in our audience, the Covenant.
Well, I have no idea who you could possibly be referring to.
Oh, indeed.
But I think the last of these comments that I'm looking at right now kind of summed it up.
Because they said it was really distressing that they're cheering from the Tory horde as minister after minister gleefully announced their cruelty was horrible.
It wasn't just Rishi Sunak who was fully leaning into the anti-trans stuff, because earlier on in the conference, Steve Barclay, the current health secretary, which is just a ridiculous combination of words, but there we are. Steve Barclay, he wants to introduce a load of anti-trans healthcare measures. Barclay's plan specifically wants to return to sex-specific language throughout the health service, so rather than saying pregnant people, they would say pregnant women every time. For example, none of that neutral language anymore. We need a common sense approach to sex and equality issues in the NHS. You know, because common sense is their code phrase for transphobia. In addition to, he wants to ban trans women from women's wards in hospitals. Whether you've got a gender recognition certificate or not, that's it. Doesn't matter. Trans history, you can go and be in hospital in a shed, I guess.
Literally, yeah. It was like in a separate room. It was like you're not even. Yeah. It's like you're something to be put to the side and not to be thought about and just completely just avoided, essentially, as a quarantine, as some would say, in this shared room.
When I was last in hospital, when I was in hospital for a month last year, I did have a room to myself, which I quite appreciated. I liked the privacy, but equally, I wouldn't want a room to myself on a ward full of men, you know?
Yeah.
It was a mixed ward all the way down. But there are going to be some other wards where that, you know, the people working on them will gleefully seize upon this and say, no, we don't have to accommodate people like you.
Oh, indeed. It gives them ammunition and legitimacy to then start discriminating. Essentially,
it's solving a problem that doesn't exist, you know? They want to ban trans women from female wards, even though there was a study last year that said that there wasn't even a single complaint made about trans women on women's wards. Nobody is complaining about this. Nobody wants this, except for the Tories who want to be so performative with how cruel they are. And how much they hate the transes.
Oh, exactly. I saw a meme the other day, which was just a sinking ship, and it said, Captain, what should we do? And then it was, we must immediately ban all trans women from toilets.
Yeah, that's exactly
and that just sums it up for the Tory party and their conference. And, you know, when I have some contacts inside of the Lib Dems in my local area because I do like a little community group thing, so I've got to keep an eye on the local council and such. And when we were chatting, they do all the canvassing, they run around, and not a single person talks about these cultural war issues of trans people in hospitals or anything like that. And it was baffling a few people who actually run the numbers within their own party, because no one gives a shit, quite frankly.
Yeah, everybody's more concerned about the cost of living, climate change, any one of a number of real-world massive issues that affect literally everybody, but no, they're using their time on this earth to make things more difficult for trans people, rather than doing anything to fix any of the problems that their austerity policies have caused.
Oh, exactly, and... yeah, exactly. I'm just like, they're making a centerfold thing, but in comparison, the Labour conference...
Yes, because you've been covering the Labour conference, haven't you? So let's hear about
so
this.
I've been looking at the Labour conference on this one, and quite frankly, they were more focused on HS2, and we were barely a footnote, which, despite being still in the range of HS2, the conference in Liverpool with the Labour Party appeared to be a considerable amount less eventful, sparkly disruptions aside. While everyone was discussing HS2 and the economy being a main focus, any mentions of trans people or the LGBT community was just a footnote in the article in newspapers, which in a way is a relief.
Yeah.
And you know, there was only one announcement regarding trans people, and that was mainly Annalise Dodd saying that they were going to go ahead with a trans inclusive conversion therapy plan. But this is welcome news, but we have to mention this is a step forward from the 10 steps back when they scrapped their policy in self-ID for trans people a few months prior, and only promised to modernise the gender recognition process. And they didn't even give too many details. Though in an article from 2 months ago, according to The Guardian, there were mentions of the process being a diagnosis provided by one doctor with a registrar instead of a panel, so that's an indication. But in the comments of the pod, let us know what you think about this. But in the end, it was very little to write home about. I was like literally trying to scrape the bottom of a barrel of trying to see some stuff, because I was like...
They just weren't talking about it that much.
No, I mean, when it comes to an anti-trans presence there was a fringe meeting by Labour Women's Declaration that was attended by Jess Phillips, and then after that, there was also a protest by Posey Parker, which that protest was easily outnumbered by pro-trans counter-protesters. On another day outside the conference, there was also a protest by Labour for trans rights, and they had their own fringe meetings too. However, despite all this, in terms of trans rights, that was pretty much it. When I did speak to Labour for trans rights, they told me that unlike the Conservative conference, we weren't put into direct line of fire in the same way, but neither has any effort been made to put out all the still raging fires that Starmer had set with us. Also, they did say that more of a front bench were happy to attend fringe events hosted by explicit transphobic groups. When I asked our audience about their thoughts on the conference, it was mixed.
Yeah, so that's a little better, isn't it? Well, quite a lot better than the Conservative conference and its obsession with bullying trans people.
Conservatives like, you are at the point of my gun, I fucking hate you. And then Labour was along the lines of, just go to the corner there, we don't want to say it, just go away.
Yeah, we're not interested in you. But then at the same time, in a sense, that's still better, though, because Labour are actually talking about the issues that more people are concerned with. Because as you said, when going around and talking to people within and for the Lib Dems, nobody's talking about trans people.
Yeah, exactly.
In a sane world, there would be a couple of mentions at a conference rather than just an absolute obsession with it. Because we are, 0.1% of the population?
Something along those lines with the census, right?
Yeah, something like that. Like, 1% or 2% at most, And there's all this stuff, particularly from the Conservatives. And Labour are actually just kind of getting on with it and trying to, hold the tiller as still as possible. But equally, given that what's happening from the Conservatives, you kind of feel like Labour should be opposing it because there's some easy wins for them by saying, well, the Tories are obsessed with trans people. We are talking about the economy. We are talking about how the cost of living crisis. We are talking about issues that actually matter to the majority of the country rather than obsessing over a very, very small minority. And they could be using that as a gotcha.
Oh, and making them like...
at every turn.
Exactly, they make them look like hysterical idiots, essentially. Yeah. Like, oh, they've run out of ideas, and like I could put me in charge of a Labour campaign and I'll make it fucking work, just by talking about how the Conservative Party are obsessed and we're getting on with it or something.
Yeah, tweet us at @WhatTheTrans if you're listening, Labour, and you need a new campaign manager. I don't think we're going to be getting a job offer from them.
One hell of a plot twist. What the Trans leads Labour campaign.
Oh, God. Can you imagine? Jesus, that would be the most inept campaign ever, but it would make a number of really good points.
Oh, it really would.
Anything else you want to say about the conferences?
As I said, I spoke to our audience. I'd better give a good plug to this. We've moved on to Threads, so we're avoiding Twitter as much as possible.
Yeah, we're still using it for announcements and things, but we're not active on Twitter in the way that we were previously.
Oh, exactly.
In terms of responding to things and sharing things and stuff, we're just not really on there anymore because what's the point, honestly?
Oh, exactly. So, as well as that, I'm going to be putting out some questions in the comments every now and again to get your thoughts and opinions on the news and maybe even, and probably put them on the podcast. So, check out our threads. But some things when I asked them about the Labour's conference, when I asked the audience, one person said they liked the speech from Annalise Dodds, Yvette Cooper, and Angela Rayner, and that we need boring.
Yeah. Boring is better than...
fearing for our lives, isn't it?
Yeah, and the kind of, as I say, the obsession that the Conservatives seem to have with us. Yeah, boring is good.
Boring is fun.
But will boring win an election?
Indeed, and with them stepping back on self-ID, they don't, one of them said they don't trust them one bit, and while Rosie Duffield's still in the party and not had the whip removed, how can we say that they'll stand by their word, essentially? But overall, it was a little warmer than the Tories, but there's still a sense of mistrust, to say the very least, especially as we were betrayed for rolling back their commitments to self-ID.
Well, indeed, and again, there's quite a lot of stuff that they could be doing, and they're not. And Keir Starmer is somehow, makes a plank of wood look interesting, doesn't he?
But you say that, though, I remember watching this clip on Twitch about someone who put a plank of wood on their chair and then walked off, and then their viewership spiked compared to when they then came back, so...
Right.
To be fair, that's comparing Keir Starmer to a plank of wood. Of course the wood's going to be more interesting.
Yeah, we're definitely not getting that campaign manager job now, are we? So, yes, that's party conference season. Could have gone better. Equally, it could have been worse, because if both parties were calling for the kind of insane anti-trans rhetoric that we're seeing from the Conservatives, if both of them were doing that, then I think we'd have already fled the country.
Oh, indeed, my bags would be already packed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if that just becomes part of the culture, something that's absolutely accepted, that way bad things lie, honestly.
Oh, indeed.
So, that was our episode. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another one. We are hoping to put something together that will be a good reference. In a couple of episodes' time, there's going to be an episode where we encourage all of our listeners to get their cis friends to listen to the podcast, because here is an episode that explains everything. We're going to lay it all out. We're going to exhaustively reference it, look at how we got to this sorry pass. But that's going to take a few weeks of research and writing, so that's not going to be the next episode. Probably 94 or 95, I think. Yes, so that'll be fun, with air quotes clanging into place around the word fun. But yes, if you've enjoyed the show, you can check us out on the social medias. We are, of course, at our website, whatthetrans.com, where you can read our fossil-free pride statement. We're on Facebook /whatthetrans and Patreon /whatthetrans if you like what we do and you think it is worth your hard-earned greenbacks. And we're on, what did you say? What's the one?
We're on Threads.
Threads, I nearly said Twitch. But Twitch is a different thing, and we're on there as well, but not as frequently.
We're looking into it, but we'll see when it comes. We're already focusing on the pods for now.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
This episode of What the Trans was written and produced by Ashleigh Talbot and Alex Bedwell, and was edited by Ben Swithin. And we would like to thank our producer-level Patreons, who are Squid Xena,
Setcab,
Jane,
Roberto De Prunk,
Rose Absolute,
Sarah,
Catherine Holcott,
Cena,
Kiki T,
Derek,
Sky Killane,
Eric Widman,
B,
Jude,
Monsieur Squirrel,
Fergus Evans,
Anubis a Jackal,
Kamina,
Brandon Craig,
Jenny,
Break the System,
Sean Phillips,
Heidi Riordan,
Ezra,
Sophia the Sixth, What Happened to the Other Five,
Lentil,
Philippa Taprug,
Alethea Aurora,
Sadie Chagall,
Clara Volume,
Amelia,
twitch.tv/kspacegaming,
Tabitha Jo Cox, aka Candy,
Zeph,
Fiona McDonald,
Tariq H,
Murgatroyd,
Ontologically Unjust,
Stella,
Cinder Gaza,
Rebecca Prentice,
Crazy Richard,
Dan Oblivion,
Florence Stanley,
Helen
Chrissy Jarvis,
Ellie Hollingsworth is overjoyed at witnessing the fantabulous return of the Spookmaster General,
Nick Ross,
Alice Chalkley,
Melody Nix,
Fiona Punchard,
John,
Lynn Mackay,
Nick Duffy,
C.B. Bailey,
Gordon Cameron,
Ted Delphos,
Wen Riverop,
Vic Parsons,
Tila Wild,
Rowan Littlejohns,
Disray Markland,
Patreon user,
Vic Kelly,
Catherine,
Sabrina McVie,
Cassius Adair,
Melissa Brooks,
Ian Coomber,
Karakan12,
April Heller,
Sophie Lewis,
Alexandra Lilly,
Claire Scott,
Ariadne Pena,
Lauren Onions,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Lanus,
Chris Hubley. Thank you so much. Goodbye.